The United States has officially entered the Iran conflict by bombing key nuclear sites, 3 of them in particular. This happened yesterday, and it was the most telegraphed bombing campaign of all time, and yet it still had the capacity to catch us by surprise somehow, because it was such a severe escalation that Israel has fantasized about, that American leadership has fantasized about for decades at this point. But it was obvious that it was going to happen, and they also sent in decoys to do like diversion techniques, diversion tactics. But ultimately, there were some people, myself included, that said that this was going to happen this weekend, going after the analysis of like people who are well sourced that still have motion. Seymour Hersh being the person that I'm of course talking about here. The legendary journalist Seymour Hersh was one of the few journalists that was even talking about America definitely striking Iran. The 2 weeks notion was obviously a smokescreen, as I talked about extensively, and it should not come as a surprise to you. When he said 2 weeks, what did we say here? I said over and over again, it's not going to be 2 weeks, it's going to be this weekend, because he's just saying 2 weeks, because everything he says is just a misdirection. Everything he says is a misdirection. And that it was inevitable that it was going to happen this weekend. And it did.
An Iranian reporter films a plume of smoke near the Fordo underground nuclear site. He claims there's no sign of major damage to the facility. But last night, the US struck Iran's 3 uranium enrichment plants using missiles and huge bunker-buster bombs. This was their main and most challenging target, the Fordo nuclear site, built deep underneath a mountain near the holy city of Qom. Satellite images from today show signs of possible damage. President Trump's decision to attack is one of the most consequential of his political career.
By the way, remember what I said yesterday when we were talking about servile nations? Remember when I said the Gulf is bad, right? The Gulf leadership is bad. They're dogs to America, Turkey included, you know, all these NATO countries like Turkey, they speak a big game against Israel, but they still absolutely follow the American line, right? Tooth and nail. But then I said there are, however, a group of countries that consider themselves to be sovereign. They consider themselves to be a sovereign nation, and that group of countries is not sovereign whatsoever. They are servile, and that is the European Union, okay? European countries on the European continent have demonstrated once again how little dignity and how little autonomy they truly have. Canada also came out as well. Only a couple weeks ago, they were talking extensively about how they wanted to decouple from America, at least on the optics front, against Israel, stating that what Israel was doing was untenable, unmanageable. When European leaders act as though they are a group of sovereign states, they are lying to their citizens. When they act as though they are bastions of liberal democracy, they are the upholders of liberal democracy, they are lying to their citizens. They are trying to keep up appearances, and that mask is slipping. They are all but vassals for Western empire and its interests, and that much is clear. Once again, I told you. And that is precisely the reason why you heard every single Western leader come out and go, Israel has a right to defend itself. Iran cannot have nukes, as though they are part of the, Republican Party in the United States of America, as though they're Trump loyalists here. When America says jump, every other country says how high. Maybe they agree with the US. If they agree with the US, why were they at least trying to acknowledge and wash away the broad discontent that their countries' populations have towards America and Israel? Do you think that European capitals are ecstatic about American dominance? Do you think that people living in Europe are excited that their leaders literally go to the United States of America and have to bow down to a pathetic man, bow down to a man who's like a child, bow down to an idiot like Donald Trump, who doesn't even do the game of diplomacy in the way that at least like previous leaders have done to make it seem as though everyone has a say in this process? No, they don't like that. European leadership understands that there is tremendous discontent with this undying loyalty towards America. And also, more importantly than that, European leaders recognize that there is a tremendous amount of discontent towards Israel amongst the population. The populations in even European capitals now are frustrated. They're fired up. They're angry. They're resentful about the unlimited support that their leadership has offered to Israel, a foreign nation. So when that kind of public distaste is happening endlessly over and over again, in order to maintain the notion of democracy, the idea that there is some sort of like liberal democracy happening, European leaders have to respond. And in that response, they try to make it seem as though they are kind of trying to separate from America. They're punishing Israel, right? They're critical of Israel, but they're not. They're not critical of Israel. And this kind of action from America and Israel basically hits the reset for all of our politicians and your politicians in Europe as well, and politicians all around the world. It is shocking to me that there was such little anti-war statements in the buildup to this highly telegraphed bombing campaign. Like, I thought at least there would be some people that hit partisan notes and say things like, oh, why are we bombing Iran? Why is Israel bombing Iran? They're opening an eighth front? Really? Like, don't they have their hands full killing Palestinian children every day, which they have nonstop, by the way? As Senator Chris Van Hollen from the Democratic Party posted 2 days prior, since Israel started bombing Iran, Israel has also killed 400 Palestinians, almost all of them at the fake aid sites that they've created with the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, a fake aid site created by both of the belligerents, the United States of America and Israel, to do perfidy, which is illegal, trickery, and aid distribution. Having a military mechanism is completely illegal. And that is what Israel and America are doing in Gaza right now. So yeah, my expectation is that Iran is going to do something. I thought it would be limited. We shall see. So far, they have not done any sort of like imminent retaliation to American bases and American assets in the region. They've only spoken about how they are going to take the legal route in terms of the nuclear proliferation stuff. So we shall see. We shall see where they go with this. But their statements have been restrained thus far. Their statements signal restraint. Statements such as, oh, this attack actually wasn't that big of a deal for us. Or even the Iranian Atomic Energy Agency coming out and making a statement about how they will pursue legal options. The most militant statement that I have read so far from that side, from the Iranian, not like the Iranian side, but like necessarily the Iranian allegiance, has been from Russia. Well, although this right here is interesting. Russia, China, Pakistan proposed draft UN security. These are the only allies that Iran has in the region, right? Aside from the axis of resistance. They propose a draft at the UN Security Council resolution calling for an immediate unconditional ceasefire in the Middle East. I wonder if this package will include Israel. I suspect that Iran is interested in blocking the Strait of Hormuz, and US now wants China to join in on the fray, get involved, and only to prevent Iran from closing the Strait of Hormuz and disrupting global oil flows. But yeah, this is what I was going to say. This has been the most consequential statement from Dmitry Medvedev, deputy chair of the Security Council of the Russian Federation. This is the most militant thing I've heard. What have the Americans accomplished with their nighttime strikes on 3 nuclear sites in Iran? 1, critical infrastructure of the nuclear fuel cycle appears to have been unaffected or sustained only minor damage. 2, the enrichment of nuclear material, and now we can say it outright, the future production of nuclear weapons will continue. A number of countries are ready to directly supply Iran with their own nuclear warheads. Now, this is a very big escalation in terms of the language being used. No Iranian leadership has said anything of the sort so far, but Russia's statements here, I would go so far as to say, are even more significant than Iran. But this is Medvedev, so I don't know if this is all that consequential. Like, it would be more impactful if it was Lavrov, or if it was obviously Vladimir Putin, something along those lines. But this is basically the most militant statement that I have heard so far. And I think Russian statements, not Medvedev, okay, but Russian statements coming from Russian envoys, make no mistake, are more important than even the Iranian leadership in terms of understanding where this conflict might go. Listen to me. Trusting Russian talk? No. Listen. Russian statements on this, on events that unfold in the Middle East is more consequential because it is a way to understand what this axis that is developing, or what this, unified front that is developing against American imperialism in the region, what direction they may lead down. Because the Iranian side, there's differences in opinion, obviously. Like the IRGC is more militant. The Islamic Republic and the civil governance side is infinitely more restrained, infinitely more diplomatic. Russia still, however, is the big dog. So when Medvedev, albeit says something insane, it could signal which direction Russia is heading down. And as predicted, as I said yesterday, China, once again, the strongest of condemnations. Oh boy, what a condemnation. The strongest you've ever heard. Classic. Yeah, just wait till China actually condemns Iran for blocking the Strait of Hormuz if they actually do so, okay? But in any case, let's keep going through the Medvedev statement. The enrichment of nuclear material, this is obviously a insane statement because he goes, and now we can outright say it. Future production of nuclear weapons will continue, implying that Iran was already in the process of developing nuclear weapons. This is not true. There is no evidence for this, right? There's no evidence for this whatsoever. So when he says that, that's the embellished part. But it's also important to recognize which direction the Russian state might be heading down. He goes 110% of the way, but the Russian government might be leaning in the, 40%, 50% of the way. Whereas the Iranian government, and what the Iranian government is saying, is seemingly incredibly restrained, if that makes sense. Do you see what I mean? Do we have any of this verified by Iran? Why not get it from the horse's mouth? This is, I would say, not Medvedev, but I would be on the lookout in this situation to hear what Russia will say. I think Russia's statements here will be the most impactful ones. Russia's statements will show which direction this conflict will go. Russian actions will show which direction this conflict will go. Because Russia's actions and Russia's statements, not Medvedev, the state, okay? The actual state, not this guy. The state itself and which direction they head here will either broaden this conflict in a way that turns into a Iraq-style situation, or will basically exhaust Israel to a degree where they won't be able to continue doing all of this nonsense, all of this madness, and will create an environment where there will be a managed negotiation to stamp out further Israeli aggression in the region, or potentially get America fully invested in implementing its grand design in the region and try to destabilize the Iranian regime. Because that is the goal here. As I have said, the ultimate goal here is not the nuclear program. Nobody gives a about the nuclear program. Please stop talking about the nuclear program. If you want to understand what the actual goal here is, the goal has always been the same since Benjamin Netanyahu said Iran has nukes, or the capacity to build nukes, since 84 or something, or whenever the Israeli state started claiming that Iran had nukes. The goal has always been regime change. The nukes are the casus belli, okay? I think it was 1992 when Benjamin Netanyahu first said it. But I'm saying that they have entertained regime change for since the revolution started. This was last night, actually, I think. Yeah. Iran's foreign minister says he will head to Moscow today and will meet Putin. So this is probably taking place right now. Do I personally think Iran should have nukes? If Iran had nukes, none of this would be happening. And the region would be an infinitely more stable region. It would be more stable in the direction that America doesn't want, though. It would be a region that had more stability because the countries in the region would have more power and more influence and more sovereignty over their own affairs. The only way to basically scale back Israeli aggression in this region is for there to be sovereign states, and there is no sovereignty unless you are outside of the banner of American influence. You do not have any sort of sovereignty whatsoever unless you have nukes. I'm sure that many of you have figured it out by now, but there is perhaps a reason why nobody does this to North Korea. You know what I mean? But they do this, and have done this successfully, the countries that they've said have nukes or WMDs, like Iraq, like Libya. Pakistan probably looks at everything that's going on right now and goes, oh my God, what an amazing thing we did. Okay? Thank Christ for that guy who came from the Netherlands and built this goddamn thing in a cave like Iron Man. Dr. Abdul Qadir Khan. Yeah, Abdul Qadir Khan. a metallurgist working on centrifuge enrichment for Urenco, joined the program at the behest of the Bhutto administration by the end of 1974. How would nukes be a deterrent, though? It's not like they'll use them, no? Yes, the whole point of having nukes is to never use them. The whole point of having nukes is that they will never use nukes on you. That's the whole point. Because here's the reality. If you have nukes, then other countries that have nukes will nuke you if you use your nukes. And therefore, when you get the nukes, you're not supposed to use the nukes. The entire purpose of getting the nukes is so you don't get nuked. The threat of using the nukes is what is at the heart of the mutually assured destruction that is the reason why so many countries have engaged in nuclear proliferation. I'm a firm and committed believer into denuclearization, as the NPT suggests is supposed to happen, but I think we all know it's not happening anytime soon. Here is Mossad's very own, IDF's very own Barak Ravid, Netanyahu at a press conference, who Trump personally called and said, your Israel is safe now. Remember that. This guy's gotten awards from every American journalistic enterprise. Barak Ravid, literally an agent of Israel, like straightforwardly. He is. I'm sorry. I know he works at Axios, but Donald Trump called him last night after bombing Iran and said directly to him, your Israel is safe. Anyway, Netanyahu at a press conference says, we will not be dragged into a war of attrition. When we achieve our goals, the fighting will stop. Okay, well, as I said, when Netanyahu says something like that, just assume the opposite if you want to be right 90% of the time, as opposed to, being right 10% of the time. When Netanyahu says something, it means the exact opposite. So he wants to do a war of attrition. Netanyahu said, oh, this will last 2 weeks. That's how you know it was going to be longer than that. Donald Trump says, oh, we want diplomacy. That's how you know it's not going to be diplomacy. He said that on October 8th about Gaza, too.